Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Lunch and Learn, sponsored by GovTech. And I guess then our folks that are going to be sponsored today are Presidio and AWS. And today's topic is From Legacy to Cloud Ready, the New Way to Modernize. We have some great conversation today, a 30-minute topic, 30-minute webinar, so stay focused. Let's do a few housekeeping notes first. My name is Kurt Wood, Senior Fellow for the Center of Digital Government. I'll be moderating the panel today. With me today, we have a couple guests I'll introduce in a second. So a few housekeeping notes, take a look. Recording of this presentation will be sent to all registrants within 48 hours. And you can participate in question and answer by using the Q&A box. So today we'll start. And with me, we have Mike Bauer and David Angradi, both from Presidio. So Mike, can you take a minute just to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kurt. Mike Bauer, I've spent the last 20 years kind of sitting on both sides of this conversation. I've worked in higher education and government adjacent organizations and led cloud strategy at Amazon Web Services, so very familiar with the cloud world, and worked with many large scale modernization efforts, and now at Presidio helping state, local education agencies actually execute on the transformation. And I just will say this, like one thing I find super fascinating and honestly a little humbling is that the core problem hasn't changed much. Agencies are still running critical services on systems built for a different era, maintained by people that are retiring and funded through budget cycles that honestly weren't even designed for technology investment. But what I think is awesome has changed is we finally have tools, AI in particular, that let us attack the problem in a fundamentally different way, not the big bang, multi-year, rip and replace, like keep CIOs up at night type of way, but something more incremental, more intelligent, and a whole lot less disruptive. So I'm excited to get into this with you, Kurt, and with Dave, of course.
Great. Thank you. David?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Kurt and Mike. So David Angradi, Field CTO for Presidio. We actually recently, over the last few months, as AI and innovation have become so much more pervasive, not just within our digital practice, but it's really getting embedded in really everything we do, from our platforms teams to networking to cybersecurity to total experience. AI is really being infused into everything that we do. So we recently created a new office of the CTO, really with the sole purpose of working with Mike, working with our customers, and really talking to them about how we're utilizing technology to really increase our team's ability to be able to generate more capability and more services for our customers, and really do that holistically across everything we do. And yeah, I love the conversation. I think it's definitely with the advent of these LLMs becoming stronger and stronger, we've definitely seen just dramatic changes with how we're empowering our customers to be able to do more with less. And I think that at the end of the day is really what it is all about.
That's great. Thank you. So yeah, again, Kurt Wood here, spent most of my career in government, last 5 years, my career as a Commonwealth of Mass CIO and cabinet secretary in technology. And I would say that certainly, the app modernization was certainly a priority. And I think it's one of these things that's such a huge undertaking in state and local government, with legacy systems and kind of the widespread, touch of government that reaches to the people. And I think, having, kind of a solid approach, and to your point, David, certainly introduce some of the AI, efforts today to kind of help out along the way is certainly a focus. And I'm very, very excited to talk with you guys today. So, but first, let's do a couple poll questions first, just to set the stage for the audience. I'm going to ask the team to put it up there for the audience. If you can just take a couple minutes, take a look at that. How old is your organization's oldest mission critical application that's still in production? So take a look at that, because I think, certainly, I mentioned when I was a CIO, certainly app modernization was a huge effort for us. And, when you're at the state side, the large enterprise applications, many things are 20, 30 years old, or 20 years old, and sitting on, older platforms, and, sitting in a state data center. They may have migrated to the cloud, but, you're still really talking about, kind of these big enterprise systems that really can't afford, to kind of take down. You have to be, constituent focused. These are mission critical services, to people's lives. Citizens depend on that. Your cities and towns, municipalities, county government, same thing. Certainly it's a huge undertaking. It takes a lot of planning. And before we get to some of the answers back to the poll question, I'd kind of like to talk a little bit, maybe open up with Dave a little bit. And as we talk through, we'll pop up the answers to the poll questions. We have a couple more after this.
Mhm.
When you think about kind of the app modernization today, I'll start with David. What's this look like today when you're dealing with state, local government? What is the market kind of focused on today?
Yeah, I think the new reality, you know, whether you're citizens of a city, a state,
Mhm.
a municipality, or you're students in a university, I think the demands for more digital experiences, more self-service is just
Mhm.
becoming a lot more pervasive, right? Like people
Yeah.
want that, they want that iPhone experience, right? They want
Right.
the ability to be able to engage on their own, be able to do things on their own, find information, solve their own problems,
Mhm.
through digital experiences. And I think, as we talk to a lot of our, state, local education
Mhm.
customers, and this poll question is a great example. You have legacy systems that have been around for a long time that really aren't designed for
Right.
self-service. They're not designed for digital experiences. So the question really becomes, how do we most effectively, and I think most pragmatically, help
Yeah.
those folks be able to actually create those experiences? That's, as I go around the country talking to different customers, that is the pervasive thing we're seeing is, hey, I only have a finite amount of budget. I have a finite
Mhm.
amount of time. I have a finite amount of resources. How do I do this in a way to be able to create a better service, for
Yeah.
my citizens, my students, whatever it might be? And I think that's the dominant conversation that I'm seeing out there.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, spot on. Let's take a look at the results of the first poll question real quick for the folks to see where we're at. So again, looking at how old is your organization, oldest mission critical application still in production. Looking, any of those numbers surprise you all? It kind of looks like the
No.
expectation, right? Yeah, 20 plus years, 32%. I mean, that's, think about that, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So absolutely. We have another quick poll question too before I move it to Mike. Mike, any thoughts from your perspective on kind of following up what David had to say?
Just like double clicking on what Dave said around, again, do more with less. And I think there's this tendency where we've always framed this conversation over 20 years as build
Mhm.
versus buy, build
Right.
versus buy. And the truth is, I think in the public sector sphere, leaders are not set up for either. So leaders are not set up for either well. They're asked to either buy something that's millions and millions of dollars of commercial off the shelf tooling
Right. Right.
for, and then what happens is it gets implemented years down the road, and you're only using 7 to 10% of the functionality of that COTS commercial off the shelf. So buying a tool is not an option. Building is also cost prohibitive now because you need
Mhm.
cloud engineers and you need data scientists on staff
Right.
and you need a whole host of other. So you almost are put in this like, how am I set up for success if I can't be a buyer and I can't be a builder? Like,
Mhm.
what is the answer? And I think this is where the biggest opportunity for human AI, like AI that incorporates a human in the loop, becomes
Mhm.
a solution in itself, is
Yep. Yep.
accelerating that modernization. I think that's
Yep.
where Dave and I both seen just
Yep.
tremendous efficiencies of
Yep.
scale happening.
Yeah.
And so I'd add to that.
That's great. I mean, I think about that today, and I think kind of where we've come from over the last few years, and how kind of AI has influenced everything. I know we're going to get into that in a minute. Let's take a quick look at the poll results for the audience here, real quick. Take a look and see what the folks had to say here. So again, where are you in your journey? Again, just starting, evaluating. Half the population, half the audience here is there. Uh, Piloting proof concept. So again, active monetization project underway, 25% of the audience. That's,
Mhm.
that's kind of, I would think that's kind of
Not
what you're seeing in
surprising.
the industry. That's not surprising, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Great.
not surprising. I mean, I
Yeah.
think a lot of the folks, I'm sure they're looking at the end of the day, is the juice worth the squeeze,
Right.
right?
Right.
For
Yeah,
the amount of
exactly.
effort and time and
Yeah.
cost it
Yeah. Yeah.
takes. And I
Yeah.
think that's where AI sort of flips that
Yeah.
equation
Yeah. Yeah.
where, customers I talk to are all saying the
Yeah.
same things like, hey, I got all this backlog of
Yep.
projects. I have a
Yep.
finite budget. If I can
Yep.
now reduce the time it takes to do stuff,
Yep. Yep.
then all of a sudden I can do more.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's become really pervasive.
No, absolutely. And we have one final poll question here before we get into the meat of the conversation today. What's preventing your organization from starting a modernization project? And I think that's critical. I think you just touched on it a little bit,
Yeah.
David. Kind of. So, any additional thoughts, Mike, on that at all? What David said, or you?
I mean, there are a whole host of things that might prevent someone from starting
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
modernization, but nothing's greater than the, hey, we've always done it this way
yeah,
mentality, right? Like that's
yeah,
the, hey, like don't, it's not my problem until something breaks. And I
yeah,
would
yeah,
argue that, like you said, Kurt, like there's life and death systems here. Like
yeah,
when you
yeah,
think about a 911 operator not being able to, take that call, or it doesn't get routed correctly. I mean, you have serious life and death, health and human
right,
services. Another example of, if when the technology, if we're just waiting for things to break before we
yeah,
start, then
yeah,
we're putting a whole host of risk at play
yeah.
here. So
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, I think in my experience, and certainly you got to, I think about how do you prioritize? How where do you start? Government is so big. People don't, I think, at times appreciate how big it really is because a lot of people work in government are in their own lane, but you think about the enterprise of government, whether it be a city or a state or a county, it's pretty big, right? And it's pretty important, and people rely on those services. So, and again, sometimes to your point, it's like you don't need to kind of make it fancy, you just need to make sure it works. But I do
Yeah.
think government has made a great effort to make sure that they can meet people halfway, in order to kind of, improve that experience. And, but underneath, you got to deal with infrastructure, you got to deal with scalability, resilience, all that stuff. So let's take a quick look at the results before we get back into the conversation. So again, looking at 37%, we're looking at really kind of the budget approval, staffing. Again, anything that surprised you? Is that what Dave, you seeing that in the industry? Kind of what
Yeah,
you,
I mean, 100%. I mean, I
yeah, yeah,
think, if you look at 2026 and as it relates to
Mhm.
AI, this is sort of the year of the ROI,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're really talking to our customers about how do we help get past the POC
yeah,
stage?
yeah, yeah,
How
yeah,
do we get to something that's more production ready? But then
right,
also,
right,
how do
right.
we actually prove out ROI, right?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah,
think that's the one big thing, our
yeah,
customers are struggling with is
yeah,
they're trying to manage up to their management
yeah,
around what is, this is going to cost me X. What am I getting in return? And
yeah,
so there's definitely I think there's gonna be a
yeah,
lot of a big light being shined on that this year. It's pretty much comes
yeah,
up in every conversation I have.
yeah, that's great. I think it's always a challenge to kind of demonstrate ROI when you're in a government setting, right? Because it's
100%.
not about profit really. It's not about sales. It's about really about the services and and how do you get it done. And at the end of the day, government is always expected. People expect to do more with less, right? So I
Oh
think
yeah.
to your point, so this is a great segue to really what we're going to talk about today. I think so. I think Mike, you're going to pop up, kind of a backdrop here. We really talk about that human loop and the AI. So why don't you guys kind of just get into it? Because I think, certainly in my experience and over the last couple of years, the AI kind of generation of AI and kind of the, acceleration of AI, and certainly when it comes to services, has taken front seat here. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Whoever wants to start.
yeah, I'll start, Dave, and then feel free to jump in. But I think
Yep.
that the business value, when we start to think about AI, and by the way, one of the pieces of that poll that I thought was interesting is that
Mhm.
upskilling is such an we haven't started because our people need to catch up, and I think this is also
Mhm.
another opportunity to learn on the job, so to speak, in
Mhm.
regards to helping upskill. Again, AI. We've heard this said over and over. I think over the last couple of years that AI is not going to replace the job. It's the person that knows AI better that's going to replace the job, right? So
Mhm.
humans are essential to a lot of this work. But at the end of the day, the business value of what human in the loop AI is all about is, again, eliminating tech debt, replacing that aging infrastructure with scalable modern platforms. But that can be a very, very large undertaking. We have to take these things. It's a boil the ocean is not an option here either. And
Mhm.
so thinking about what are those stair steps that we can take around eliminating tech debt? How can we use
Mhm.
AI for that purpose? But again, not with a boil the ocean. It's with a meet your staff, meet your team where they're at. Um,
Mhm.
that's the first principle, obviously, of human enabling AI readiness, like getting infrastructure that can support those real AI use cases when you're ready. Again, cloud to us is the no brainer. And when it
Mhm.
comes to like, you're just not going to have the compute power, the storage to do that on prem at scale,
Mhm.
especially in public sector when these systems are so desperately in need of upgrading. To do that on a cycle really necessitates a way of thinking of cloud as an asset, not a threat. And of course, we can talk about all the security that goes along with that. The
Mhm.
third is, of course, reducing costs, less manual maintenance, smarter resource use. I always think of the Tesla example right now. Like I just am blown away, not at the fact that the Tesla model is so a great electric car, but how all of a sudden maintenance has gone to nothing. I don't know if anyone on the call owns a Tesla, but like the maintenance of it is simply, changing an air filter essentially is the maintenance, and the tires, of course. But that's it. It's like I am blown away by how cloud is overhauling the reduction of costs for these AI initiatives. Increasing agility, responding to those market changes and the needs faster. These projects don't take years anymore, Kurt. They just don't. They can take weeks, months at the most, because of how efficient AI has made our jobs. And then de-risking innovation, like building in the security and the governance and compliance. We have the ability to do this now privately. A lot is happening right now in the public LLM space, but there's so much more that can happen in the private LLM space. And I think that governance is really necessary for any sort of public sector discussion. How do we build chatbots that are not out in the public model? How do we do that in a compliant way? I think these are the core tenets, the way we see the value of human AI in the loop. And Dave, any comment there? We can maybe just move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to sort of bookend it, I mean, I think traditionally, you would look at this as a problem you'd solve with more labor. And I think everyone realizes, well, I'm not getting more labor, or I need to work with a big systems integrator that this is going to take 20, 30 people. Well, those days are over. And now, it really allows us to approach this problem with smaller teams, think of 2 pizza teams, like that sort of mentality of folks that really understand how to pick the right architectures, pick the right platforms, understand, not just what you want to build, but why you want to build it, and then inject AI into that. So all the heavily labor intensive things that would be done with 10, 15, 20 or more people now is being replaced by the AI. So it's really less about the actual coding of things anymore. And it's really more about, what are you building? Why are you building it? You now can spend more time on that spec, knowing that the intensive labor aspects of a modernization effort are going to be dramatically reduced, 50, 60, 70% or more in some cases.
Yeah, let me just comment too. I know Mike's going to pop up on the slide here too. And I think I look at, this back in my time as an executive, kind of overseeing, kind of large enterprise, not just from a technology or digital, but also from a business and financial and kind of leadership role. And I think when you think about this, and I think when you think about government, I know the audience is mixed today, but this is really something for everybody in the government space, right? You have your leadership, you have your political leadership, you have your executive leadership at an agency, you have your financial leadership, your legislative leadership, and certainly you have your business owners, right, that are really the ones that drive the business, right, that have to rely on the applications and the infrastructure. And then certainly you get your technical and security and risk staff too. So I think when we talk about this today, especially in the space of AI, there's something for everybody. But at the end of the day, people actually understand, and it resonates, that if you can do these things, more efficiently, and that you can actually produce results that you can see in an interim basis versus waiting 5 years for a deliverable. By the time you actually deliver it, the technology stack is old, right, or gone, right? So I think those are areas, I think, as a leader, I think are just a tremendous opportunities when we think about that. So I know Mike's brought up another quick slide here. Go ahead, David. Yep.
If I can jump in, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I'm not going to read through this slide, but you hear this notion of, human in the loop, and we call it human AI. I think it's important to understand why we did this, right? Because I think, as we started engaging with customers across, you name the number of verticals, state, local, all sorts of big universities, small, big states, little states, what we figured out was there are common patterns that are across all of these things. And so what we've done is we've taken a lot of those and packaged them up, so that as we work with our clients and we talk to them about how they want to use AI, we have a lot of prepackaged things that we bring to the table. That's what at the end of the day reduces the effort here, right? But I think what's really key is there's always a human in the loop, right? Our general opinion is, at this point in time, AI is not going to replace people. We haven't seen that yet. I don't think that's necessarily a reality, but AI is going to be an accelerator to your people. And whether you work with third parties or you do it yourself, I think there's a lot of ways that, you're now able to modernize and just build, and just at the end of the day, do more with less. And I think that's really the point of this slide is, let the workload determine where you put it, right? Obviously, AWS has a tremendous amount of capability that we work with, but how do we help you get beyond, just experimenting things, right? So we've done a lot of those efforts. We've packaged a lot of this stuff up to really empower you to kind of do this stuff faster. And I think it's really been customers are loving it. I mean, they just love the
Yeah.
speed with which we're able to kind of help them modernize, not just modernize, but then
Right.
take over, right?
Yeah.
Because we're using common tools that ultimately
Right.
they're going to use.
That's right.
Yeah, and I see real quick too before we go to Mike. I think, I think about like you can see it, you can feel it, you can touch it, right? Because it's right there. You don't have to wait.
Mhm.
It's right in front of you today. And I think to your point about, job of the workforce, I think it is adaptable. I mean, executives have to be in kind of in sync with everybody and kind of make sure that there's an appropriate plan and, kind of certainly guardrails, certainly. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely 100% right. Mike, any thoughts, follow-ups on that?
Just the exclamation point on the private by design and the
Yep.
accelerator model, right? To go
Mhm.
back to the guiding principles around having guardrails around what we're designing for our customers that work in public sector, that is key. I mean, it has to be guaranteed privacy. It
Yep.
has to be engineered for trust. That's public sector is all about, right? Is that
Mhm.
citizen experience and so I think that's a huge. And then the accelerators. That's what this was our attempt, Kurt, to
Yeah.
really hit that middle lane that I said, not build, not buy, but right
Right.
down the middle with an accelerator. An accelerator is
Right.
meant to be customized and built for purpose. And that's what our hyperscalers are doing. AWS is actually giving funding out to say, hey,
Yep.
Presidio, go into state of blank or go into this HHS team and do a workshop with them next week. I mean,
Yep.
we really are agile enough to go in now and say, we can workshop this with you and it's paid for. It's paid for by
Right.
AWS because they know if we can build these accelerators fast enough, they know in
Yep.
the long term that creates a utility of and a win for
Mhm.
everybody. So
Yeah.
it's a very that's the main thing that I'd say on this one.
I appreciate where you're coming from too, because I think about, kind of an investment. I mean, I think it's kind of a a different approach, right? You're investing the time and energy and, developing that partnership, right? Because I think, on the state side, I mean, folks have been doing this a long time. They understand the mission, they understand the limitations, they understand, how things, the nuance of government, right? Not all government's the same. So I think having that ability, and I think, Presidio and AWS coming in to be able to kind of incubate or kind of guide and have a conversation. It's just not all about the sales of the product, right? It's really about how do we put in the right approach for you as a customer and kind of support your mission. And I think state and local, they appreciate that. I mean, certainly there's framework and regulations. We all understand that procurement prospect, but at the end of the day, I think they appreciate you coming and having that conversation to understand their requirements. A little bit more here too. This is great.
I think we need to end on this and maybe open if there's an opportunity for questions. But
Mhm.
these are real numbers with real customers, right? This is
Yeah.
without using AI, you're talking about modules and
Mhm.
applications and critical things that thousands of applications that are still out there in COBOL and Fortran and mainframe systems that have years of modernization required.
Mhm.
10 resources at 19 years. It's going to take 19 years for one of our customers, and we were able to do this. It would have taken 2 years of time without AI to complete.
Mhm.
We were able to do this in 3 to 6 months
Mhm.
using human AI framework, right?
Yeah.
Saving 18 months. We had another a code analysis that was going to be $200,000 a year for 2 years for like 10 resources, $4 million with our human AI framework.
Right.
Again, this customer experienced we were able to do this in $300,000. Like we're not even talking about seven-figure investments anymore. We're talking about $300,000 statements of work, saving millions back to taxpayers and of course to public sector. And then that
Yeah.
last one, you see the all the ability to let AI do what it does best, which is the grunt work, and leaving the human to do the other 30% of the effort. Right? We were able to
Yeah.
go through quality of all critical modules could be made like to match AI quality, but 5,000 modules were skipped in the comprehensive nature of that completeness. All the modules are completed with high, I say high, human AI. Modernization phases were accelerated. So bottom line, AI
Yeah.
is from a software development, from a modernization, from an app development
Yeah.
standpoint, it's just blowing the doors off.
Yeah. David, any follow up on that before? I think we have a couple of questions.
Yeah,
So
I mean, obviously the proof points are there. I'll give you one anecdote of one I've been directly involved with the state. And we did a proof of value of human AI. And
Mhm.
ironically, they were struggling. It wasn't really a big app. We started with something small,
Yep.
but they had gone, I believe, 4 or 5 weeks of and multiple attempts, and they struggled to be able to modernize it, to be able to
Mhm.
just get it into more of a microservices.
Yeah.
We had one guy that went in and did it in 6 hours,
Yep.
literally deployed an agent, reverse
Yep.
engineered the code, and then we utilized, a
Mhm.
really good LLM to modernize the code.
Yep. Yep.
Now, we didn't do anything in terms of redoing the UI or anything. Now, generally, it
Right.
wouldn't be that quick, but
Yep.
just base level, it just goes to show you the kinds of capability now that can be had.
Yeah.
And the returns and the ROI is just, I mean, I've been selling application development
Yep.
services for a long time, and I've never
Yep.
seen anything like this.
I think about the back end of systems too, because I think, you certainly get the front end where, your citizens have to engage, right, or your constituents, but the back end is just as important, from a workflow and from, accessibility and, being able to kind of get the right
Yeah.
information to the people. So, that, to your point, workflow, the automation, kind of the AI layer, to be able to get, to those services to get, people to get to that data quicker and be able to provide
Oh,
the
yeah.
right, framework is critical. So, it kind of leads to a question from the audience. It's like, and I always think about this too, because I've always had this. I always had to felt like, even though I was an executive, I had to manage up, right? So I think about, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that government have about, or agencies have about, app modernization? Because you kind of mentioned it, like people kind of, think about it, but then they don't really know. They get overwhelmed. Any thoughts on that at all?
My immediate thought is this doesn't have to be done all at once. We're building
Yeah,
agents here,
yeah,
agents,
yeah,
agentic AI.
yeah,
It
yeah,
doesn't have to be all at once. Dave said
yeah,
something so key that when you have a lot of workforce folks retiring and moving on, you have code that was never commented, that was never
yeah,
annotated, that was
right,
never, you don't really know what the inputs and
right,
outputs of those old programs are doing.
yeah,
What AI can do is go look at that old
oh,
code and just give you comments and
yeah,
stop there. It doesn't have to go rewrite new code for you if you don't want it to. Like, so
yeah,
it can meet you where you're at. It don't have to go through and build 5 agents and do all of this in a matter of 6 months. You can
yeah,
do this piecemeal. Let me just do one agent. Just pick one application that you're curious about testing the waters with. We can
yeah,
help this, and again funded, taken care of,
yeah,
and we can go
yeah,
look at the comments and build the annotations and build the documentation to show you what this old legacy application is
yeah,
doing. And that alone is a win. I was just with California's a big department in California last week, and we did a demo for them of human AI, and they just wanted the comments. They didn't even
yeah,
want to go the next
Yeah.
step and do the modernization. They just wanted
yeah.
to have the annotations of their old code, and that's a win.
That is just such an awesome point, because I think, I think of my old days, the old mainframe days, or like, I used to be in public safety most of my career, but I think about, we had like two or three coders, and, somebody retired or died. It was it. I mean, you were done, right?
Yeah.
You went through the file drawers, you went through everything. You couldn't heat, the way they named files, and the next person up really never had an appreciation of what that individual did for coding perspective. So I think, I don't want to simplify what you just said, but I think about kind of the immediate kind of importance of that is so critical, right? That you can actually kind of resolve something in moments, right? At the end of the day, I mean, even, and again, I think that's great. David, any thoughts on that at all from your
No,
perspective?
I mean, I think honestly, Mike hit the nail on the head, right? I mean,
Yeah,
these projects now, I mean, the reasons people don't touch these systems are all the things you talked
yeah,
about. And
yeah,
quite literally, we've built out agent technology that eliminates that and takes that risk out of
yeah,
it. And these projects aren't months and years
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, there are weeks, maybe into the small number of months. And I think,
yeah,
the costs are going to dramatically, as
yeah,
your cost of
yeah,
development is reduced, it's
yeah,
now going to allow,
yeah,
state, local, you name it, to be able
yeah,
to do more with less, quite
yeah, yeah,
literally. I mean,
yeah,
I think that's the biggest
yeah,
win for, and I think Mike, I'll touch on it, somebody else, Mike said, like, this doesn't have to be an all or nothing scenario. I mean,
right,
we
right,
we see
right,
customers that are just saying, hey, you know what, let's just focus on the front end first. Let's
yeah,
modernize how we actually interact with our citizens, with our students, whatever. And then
yeah,
we'll worry about that back end.
yeah,
We'll help modernize it. So we can do this in a very slow
yeah,
process. We can move
yeah.
as fast or as slow as you need to. Because Mike said, we meet you where you are at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
That's great. That's great. So we're up against it. So we've come to the end of our half hour, 30 minutes. So I want to thank you, gentlemen, today for some great insight. Certainly, the audience should check it out. Certainly the team here that's presented today is certainly engaged day to day. They understand it, they live it, they breathe it. So I want to thank AWS and Presidio for today's webinar, Lunch and Learn. Thank you, folks. I want to, more importantly, I want to thank the audience for participating today. And again, remember the webinar will be available on demand at webinars.govtech.com. And you can see the rest of the information down below if you need any assistance. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you today. Thank you very kindly for your engagement today. Great information and very exciting what's happening here. I'm an old Dodger here. I've been around a long time, but this is really exciting stuff. So thank you.
Yes. Thanks,
Thank
Kurt.
you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Talk later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.